Chats with Trae. Chats with Trae. Chats with Trae. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Chats with Trae. I'm your co-host, Trae Holiday, and I'm really excited to dive into the discussion today. Burrows. She's going to be sharing with us a couple of different pathways and really her pathway from going from education into the tech world. Welcome, Mariya.
Thank you, Trae. It's nice to be here.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here. And really, I'm excited because, your story is just what we hope people will understand, that there are a multitude of pathways to go from whatever they're doing now to really play into this tech sphere that we see booming so much in Seattle and in Washington. So thank you again.
Of course. Yeah, I'm happy to be here. I'm also really happy to get this information out there just because I feel like that tech has this reputation of being very gatekeepy. You need to have a college degree to get in, and you need to be some brainiac. But none of that is true. Tech is for everyone, and I want to be able to share like the different pathways and resources for people to break into this industry if that's what they want.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things that so many people understand in the tech world is that, it provides for livable wage incomes. I mean, and I think that when people are looking at how they can elevate themselves, COVID has a lot of people having to transform themselves. Some businesses have had to close, some industries have had to shift and pivot. And again, I'm excited to dive into your story. And we're going to really start with the beginnings of Mariya Burrows.
Okay.
And, tell the people about, where you grew up and kind of what got you through when we're talking about your first career.
That's interesting. I grew up in Anchorage, Alaska. I grew up in Anchorage, Alaska. It was very much a small town, at least when I grew up there. And so I really wanted to get out to the big city. And so for me, that was Seattle. And so I came down here to attend the University of Washington. That's where I went to undergrad. My first career was in speech language pathology, which is technically in the health sciences. And I wish I had a more compelling reason for getting into it, but really my parents wanted me to be in healthcare. I didn't like blood, and speech pathology let me break into healthcare without like looking at wounds to me. So that's really why I chose it. Once I got into the field and speech pathology is kind of cool. You can work in a lot of different settings with a lot of different age groups. For me, my heart was in pediatrics. And so I ended up working in the schools for a long time. I had my own private practice briefly, but I worked in the schools. I worked with kids and assessed some of their cognitive linguistic skills and determined if kids were eligible for special education services.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so funny because I have my own experience with speech pathology. My youngest son, when he was in preschool. They were like, well, there's certain words he's not, he wasn't pronouncing things right. So that he actually had a speech therapist come in. It was like one day a week for a couple of hours or an hour or whatever, because he was, young, and
Mhm.
she would come in and work with him. But because of that, he actually realized education plan, an IEP, right? And so it wasn't that he was deemed as special education. But I understand there's a really fine, needing these kind of services and then being deemed special education. Can you talk a little bit about that?
It is a really fine line. If I'm being honest, I think that it's one that a lot of professionals are still grappling with.
Mm.
Um, I think you've hinted at the potential for inequity to flourish in that system, and I would say, yes, it's there. Um, so, not necessarily related to speech, but another example of inequity that I had often seen is children who speak with African American vernacular, right, which is
Mm.
a wide language. Linguistics recognize it as such. A lot of the standardized tests that we use in speech pathology don't necessarily reflect that. And
Mm.
so, in my time working as a speech path, I often saw children qualified for speech therapy when really they were just speaking a different dialect, a different
Mm.
language. Um, yeah, so there's inequity. There's inequity in that system. And after working in it for several years, I just that was a hard system for me to be in. And so that's when I started looking for an exit strategy.
Mm.
Um, yeah.
Well, what were some of the main examples or maybe experiences that you had that really said, something here is not right? And I think that sometimes, people talk about, well, I'm working hard, I'm going to be that champion. But what was it that you really experienced that had you go, actually, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to make this pivot. I think that that's really key in terms of your
Yes.
story.
Yep. So I want to preface this by saying I think the field of speech language pathology is very important and very helpful. And it's often inaccessible to people that look like us. That's a huge problem with it. I also found out that it's the fourth whitest profession in the US.
Wow.
As a speech pathologist, I was noticing all of these inequities all over the place. And I wanted to speak out about them. But I think where we were as a society then, and also being the fourth whitest profession in the US, um, like that conversation was not like no one wanted to have that conversation. I didn't feel
Mm.
like within that profession I could move the needle forward at that time. And I'll give you an example. Like tech is another area that another profession that has a lot of difficulty, like recruiting and retaining people of color and women. But at least in the tech space, the conversations I have here is we recognize there's a problem. How do we fix it? There's a lot of conversations about how do we fix it. And when I was working as a speech language pathologist, that we weren't having those conversations. Our conversations were, is racism real? Are these
Mm.
policies hurting Black and Brown students? That was my experience. And so, when people still have so much learning and unpacking to do, I felt room for me to really move the needle forward there.
Yeah.
Um, I think about this a lot in our research too, and I think this reminds me of something that I've spent a lot of time thinking about for educators and for healthcare professionals. A lot of us are trained in this idea of evidence-based practice,
Yeah.
and we have to use research to inform our clinical decision-making process. But if you look at our research, most of who participates in our research, at least in my field, I know this is true for a lot of other fields, they're white folks and they're middle to upper class
Mm.
folks. And so we are taking research that is really meant or that is really catered to everyone, and it doesn't work. And we see health disparities. Yeah. So when I think about healthcare providers and educators needing to unlearn some of the about going back to the research, because if you are blindly applying evidence-based practice, you are inevitably going to be perpetuating bias in your clinical practice.
Mm.
So it's cyclical. It's this whole, it's systemic.
Yeah.
It's systemic.
Well,
Yeah.
you really, I think, highlight some valid points there. And I was just talking, I mean, really about blanketed approaches.
Hmm.
And unfortunately, that's what happens with evidence-based practice.
Yes.
Oftentimes, it isn't actually looking at the ethnicity, the upbringing,
Yes.
the cultural responsiveness. It's not to have a more customized
Yes.
approach. It almost feels like that's a disjointed process for evidence-based practice. But I love that you're diving into a little bit more, because I think that a lot of these same elements you're talking about, as we get more into this tech conversation and chat, you know, there's some things there that I think a lot of folks from a community perspective, may not understand. And one of the biggest reasons why I was so excited to have you on today, Mariya, was really to be an example of what it means to actually look at some of these pathways into tech, and then be thinking about it in terms of it being accessible. I think the accessibility is so key. You just mentioned it in terms of speech pathology,
Hmm.
right? But the accessibility for people to be able to see themselves as whatever it may be, right? A software developer, a coder. And so we'll get into that a little bit.
Yes.
Before we go and take a break, I just want to give you a moment to set folks up for what they can learn a little bit after this break, as we kind of dive into more of the pathways around tech, and then your
Hmm.
particular story in and of itself.
Do you want me to share resources? Is that what you were?
Yeah, just
Yeah.
just let folks know what they can expect a little bit after the break.
Oh, sure. Yep. So I'm going to be talking about my experience going through an apprenticeship program called ADA Developers Academy. It's where I did my coding training, and also I completed an internship. But I'm also going to be sharing other resources that people can utilize as well. You can be self taught, you can go through a boot camp, you can do an apprenticeship program, you can go to college. Really, there are so many ways to enter software engineering and technology in general. And I want to be able to talk about those things and share that information with folks.
Well, you guys are hearing it here from Miss Mariya Burrows. I'm excited because as I was speaking to Mariya, to be honest, I was mind blown at the amount of ways that people could find themselves in the tech world. And I was also mind blown because there's some real strategies taking form with regard to bringing more diversity into the field. So we'll dive into that right after this short break. You're watching Chats with Trae. Converge Media produces culturally relevant content for Black and urban audiences. Our coverage is raw, transparent, and objective, praised by community leaders, government officials, and residents. Support Converge Media today via Venmo, Cash App, or PayPal at Converge Media. Welcome back, everybody, to Chats with Trae. I'm your host, Trae Holiday, and Burrows, talking about tech. You're going to dive into your own story. So we kind of ended there with you as a speech pathologist. You were working in the education system. What was it that made you say, you know what, I'm done, I'm moving over? And then what made you think about tech?
Hmm. Yeah. So, what made me think that I'm done is I felt like I personally couldn't move the needle on the things that were upsetting to me in my old profession. Um, and so, knowing that, it was really hard to go in and day out and feel like not only am I complicit in perpetuating these inequities against students and families that look like mine, like I'm not just complicit, I'm what's that word? Perpetrating it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I didn't want to be part of that system anymore. And so I just thought, I'm going to change careers. The world's my oyster. What do I want to do now? And so I spent some time exploring a lot of different career options, and just talking to folks. Like I would message people on LinkedIn and be like, tell me about your job. I met with a lot of lawyers because I thought about going back to law school. And I also met with a lot of software engineers. Especially Black women. I just went on LinkedIn and started looking for Black women that were software engineers, and I was like, "Please tell me, what is your life like? What is your job like?" And then they gave me the skinny. And so I took a free online class through YouTube. There's a YouTube channel called Free Code Camp, and they have so many classes, just free tutorials that you could take online with some built-in projects into those classes. So I took an intro one on a programming language called Ruby. I loved it. I just loved it. It just clicked. As soon as I
Mm.
took that tutorial, I was like, yeah, this is the direction I want to go in. And it was just a 4-hour class, and I got so much out of it. And so after that, I started doing some research online. I knew that boot camps were a pretty popular thing in our area, and I thought that was what I could use to help me transition into technology. So in that search, that's how I came across Ada Developers Academy,
Mm.
and it's just been a life-changing program for me. And yeah, so for folks that don't know, Ada Developers Academy is an apprenticeship program here in Seattle. It's for women and gender expansive folks, and they really try to take an intersectional approach with race as well. So they try to prioritize people of color who are underrepresented in tech, and that includes Black folks.
Mm.
And the EDA program is tuition free. So that was another big perk for me. I took out a lot of student loans for training for my first career. And so I really didn't want to take more out. So it was 6 months of classes, tuition free. And then it came with a 5-month paid internship.
Wow.
And so for most folks, they are extended an offer at their internship company. And so they had a very high job placement rate as well,
Mhm.
which is not necessarily true of some of the other boot camps in our area. And so their program seemed really like streamlined to facilitate your success.
Wow, and you're just talking about it. I mean, within 11 months, it sounds
Hmm.
like, so really within a year, less than a year commitment, here you are going from, education and this kind of antiquated system where you're like, there's no moving the needle here in this regard.
Hmm.
The top fourth, whitest profession in the nation. And then you go from, that to being very, I think for me, I love hearing that you were reaching out to folks, really talking to people, because that's what I try to tell my 15-year-old now. I'm like, you know what? The only way that you're going to know about something is if you start talking to people doing the thing, if you start immersing yourself in the industry, if you start being proactive in this kind of search. And so you were very proactive to reach out to folks, and bold.
Yes.
You have to be courageous when you're, speaking to strangers. So you really did like say, look, this is what I'm going to do. And then Ada paved the way for you. How was your experience in this Ada developers program?
It was incredible. It really was. Like I said, they have a program that really sets you up for success. But beyond that, I think the program and the people that go through it are amazing. One thing that I didn't really talk about was like the training that I had for my original profession. So, undergrad and graduate school, it was pretty cutthroat. It was
Mm.
really competitive. There was a lot of competition between students. And I think sometimes that breeds like a toxic environment and a competitive spirit that doesn't necessarily bring out the best in me. And I don't think it brings out the best in anyone, really. And so at Ada, they really stress this idea of collaboration over competition. And
Mm.
that is so pervasive throughout the culture there. Everyone was encouraged to ask questions. Everyone was supported. I almost felt like it was being in an academic environment, but healing like some of
Mm.
those previous negative experiences that I've had. And it was like I didn't know that I needed it, but it felt great once I was in it. Yeah, so I was really thankful for that. The collaboration is incredible. I've never been in a learning environment like that, so that was pretty meaningful to me. And then beyond that, also what makes it so different from the rest of my educational experiences is I think it's really hard to fail at ADA. It is a very
Mm.
high support system. I joke to people like, I don't know why I took out so many student loans when here there's ADA, who's a nonprofit, and they're able to support me and all of the students so well without charging us tuition. Like, what did I
Yeah.
pay for before? Um, so, to give you an idea, I had two mentors assigned to me when I was at ADA. The first one was a mentor who completed the program. The other one was just an industry mentor, someone that volunteers with ADA. I also had my own personalized tutor that would meet with me every week to make sure I was like staying on top of homework assignments and understanding the material. So had one-on-ones with my instructors every other week, and we also had like group study, study groups with my classmates and things like that. And so, oh, and then also if your instructors feel like you have, missed the mark or they're worried about you, like failing, like not keeping pace with the intensity of the program, they will meet with you extra, like with the
Wow.
instructors to make sure that you're on pace. And I think my cohort, everyone graduated.
Mm.
Yeah, so it's super high support. I think that's incredible. And I would also say that those supports continued into internship. And so for me, my internship was I interned at Amazon. I had 1 month on campus before we switched to COVID.
Mhm.
And I thought that they did an incredible job of switching to this online platform and still making sure that people were supported. And that's Ada, and it's also my mentors who kept in touch with me throughout the whole year.
So much of this to me as I'm listening to you speak, it really is, taking a more relational approach
Yes.
and personalizing it for what you need as a
Yes.
student. And this is, why one of the reasons, I mean, I could talk about all the reasons why I was so excited to have you on today. But really, when I was talking to you and you were explaining a little bit about this, I was realizing that these are the kinds of programs when we talk about the fact that there's a different approach that you can take in the educational system. There's a different approach when you're working with folks that are ready to learn,
Yes.
hungry to learn, and how you adapt to each individual student is so key. We were just talking before about these blanketed approaches, and I think that I'm loving to hear that Ada is doing this very personalized approach for each student, and also throughout the way, really being the support. Lee, that's what any student needs, is to know that they are supported, and that, hey, even if they get down on themselves, right, like, oh man, I'm not getting this one bit of material, that one part, I'm trying to work my program and I'm having an issue, that they actually have somebody there to say, you know what, it's okay, and we're going to help see you through this, instead of leaving it up to the student to try to figure out on their own. So I love that you explain all of
Mhm.
that. And you're talking a little bit about your internship here. How was that, as you had 6 months of this kind of intense training, very supported, obviously, and I love the non-competitive environment. I think we need more and more of that in schools. So much of what we see is about competition, right? And
Yes.
knowing me, I'm probably going to blame capitalism, right? But
Yep.
ultimately, I think so much of it is about competition. How was it for you as you kind of made that transition? You said that they were there to support you. What was it like getting kind of maybe building relationships with folks at Amazon? How was that in terms of your internship?
So my internship was pretty good. The nice thing about ADA too is they try to filter out internship companies, and within those companies, the teams that work with ADA. And so the team that I worked in had 80s from several years before, and like I think they'd been partnering with ADA 4 years in a row.
Mm,
They had an ADA intern all those years, and that person was extended an offer each time. So they knew what they were getting into. That helped
mhm,
make my experience a lot smoother. And then also when I interned, um, there were 2 women on my team, on my internship team, who had gone through ADA. So they were
wow.
huge support systems. It is a tough transition. I would say there's been 3 tough transitions. It's starting ADA because it feels like this water hose of information coming at you constantly. It is really rigorous, but then you get used to it after like a month. And then I had another feeling like that when I started internship, um, because I had to learn a completely new tech stack. I had to learn how to navigate the Amazon ecosystem, which is immense. Yeah, it was a lot. But anyway, so
Mm,
because my team had already been familiar with the program, it made the personal transition a lot easier. Folks were really nice. They encouraged me to ask questions. They were always available for one on ones. I had a great mentor. My mentor didn't go through ADA, but she was a huge support. And she's kept in touch with me as I've transitioned into tech. And she's always just offering her support and checking in. Yeah,
wow.
it's been great.
It's really great to hear this, to be honest, because I think for me, the biggest thing that I'm really already taking away from this chat with you is that there are support systems out there. And if you're looking to change your life, to, reinvent yourself, and
Mhm.
so many people during COVID are looking to do that,
Yes.
then it's important to really be able to understand these avenues. So you were also talking about outside of ADA that, there's other programs, right? Because I know ADA is, it's specific for women and those who identify,
Mhm.
right, in terms of woman. But tell us a little bit more about some of the other programs you were talking about,
Yes.
coding for free, and a lot of these things. There's certain tools out there folks can use.
Yes. Oh, before I talk about those, can I mention a couple more things about Ada
Oh my
that
gosh,
yes.
yes!
Um, so this I don't have children, but I just wanted to share this for folks who are interested. Ada recently started offering free childcare
Wow.
for for parents who want to go through the program and are struggling to find or afford childcare. They can help parents out with that. So one thing that is cool about them is they're constantly evaluating like what are the obstacles that our students have and how can we help with them. And so that was one new program that they implemented that I think has been really helpful. And then the other part that I didn't even talk about, Ada, is they have a social justice curriculum, which I've never been in a
Mm.
learning environment that had something like that, where we openly talk about like anti-Black bias and anti-racism and how to be a good ally. And that's also a core part of the program. And so yeah, that was another part of the program that felt very healing because I'd not been in an education environment like that before.
Well, I think that I'm loving that you added those
Yeah.
two things, absolutely. Before we even move on from ADA, because I think what you're really describing to me is profit, that they're not doing this and trying to wring you out for money after from this level to this level. Oh, you
Yes.
need childcare, we got that too, but you got to pay. All of those things are really about this kind of more relational approach, which I
Yes.
think actually happens at a nonprofit level when you're
Yes.
not looking at each student as a changes the dynamic a bit. So, I mean, shout out to you, Ada. You guys are doing the right things and really hitting the marks. And I think that it is important for any type of educational environment to constantly observe it. So the fact that they know now we need childcare, we need to make sure that that's not a barrier or burden for any of our students. That is so key to
Mhm.
this. So back to what
Oh,
I
shoot,
was
and I
saying.
have
Yeah.
one more, sorry,
Yeah.
I just keep
See, no,
thinking
too
about
many
it.
great things about Ada. I
Yeah,
love it.
yeah. They offer free therapy for Black folks going
Wow.
through the program, and it's offered by Black therapists. So, I think what I'm highlighting here is they try to think about the students, the specific students, and the barriers that they might have, and recognizing that students will have different barriers, but, like, addressing the different barriers that exist for the different types of students that go through ADA. I love that about them. Yeah,
Wow.
anyway, that was my last one
No, I
about
mean,
them.
well, I'm just glad that you have so many things to draw from with
Mhm.
Ada. I mean, it's not often, to be honest, where you get a college student, even if they have a support system, because they had to pay so much.
Yes.
There is a difference in how they absorb that, how they deal with it, and what they walk away with. I know for
Yes.
me, going to Howard and UW Tacoma, and even a stint at Central and Green River for a minute there as a parent. Each environment brought something specific, but I was paying for that
Yes.
environment. I was paying for whatever support was given to me, right?
Right.
And the ideas around, I had some folks that were going above and beyond, definitely at Howard. I can name a few folks there, and definitely in my experience in Washington, D.C. as a young person, right? But I love hearing this, because to be able to get it all in one institution, it says a lot about Ada's approach. And really, they are creating a pedagogy that I think a lot of educational environments can learn from. So I'm glad that you had all the additions for Ada.
Yes.
But we did talk a
Yeah.
bit about some of the things that really inspired me too. Was there's pathways for folks who have been incarcerated. I mean,
Yes.
there's pathways, like you said, that are free.
Yes. Yeah, Unloop is the other pathway that I'm thinking of. These are for folks who have been incarcerated, and it is also a free program. I forgot how many months of training that it has, but yeah, it's to help folks transition into the tech industry who I don't want to say criminal justice system.
Right,
It's not
right.
justice, but
Mhm.
whatever it is. Yes, that's another
We say
option.
those who have been incarcerated.
Those who have been incarcerated. Thank you. Yes.
Mhm.
So that's another pathway for those folks to get into technology. Um, That's the other main nonprofit one that I know
Oh,
of.
good.
I think sometimes folks who go through that program will often have to do a side project to demonstrate their tech skills to help like finish that transition into the into the tech sector. There's another program called Apprenti in our area, and I think that one has some assessments that you have to take. You don't have to go to college or anything like that, but it's just some general math and general English language arts assessments, and then they'll connect you with an apprenticeship program. So I think you do on the job training through them,
Mm.
and that one has a pretty high placement rate as well. And there's also boot camps in our area. And so the way I think about an apprenticeship versus a boot camp is really two folds. There's there's the internship portion, and there's how long a program is. And so, in my experience, boot camps have been shorter, and they don't typically come with an internship program.
Mm.
But people have still been really successful with that. The people that I know who have done that, spent a couple months studying before they did a boot camp. They met a lot of people in the tech industry through their boot camp, so it helped them with networking a lot, and then they were able to demonstrate their skills through a side project and then apply for jobs that way.
Mm.
So, that's one way that you can get maybe a more direct or a faster path into technology because there's not the internship part that goes along with it. And then there's also self taught. A lot of people are self taught. That's not uncommon, especially now. There are so many tutorials online for free. And there are also very affordable ones, like less than $15, where you might get 20 plus hours of instruction.
Wow.
Um, yeah, there's a lot of different ways to enter the field, and you don't have to have a computer science degree. People enter the field all the time being self-taught. It's not uncommon.
Wow. That really does, I think, break the barrier and debunk the myth around, what it looks like to get into tech. And you've brought a lot of vital information right here to our audience. I so appreciate it. My last question for you, I got to ask it because when we think about tech jobs, and as I said earlier, a lot of the time people are looking for livable wage incomes.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit. You don't have to be personal. Tell us how much you make, but really, what are the ranges? If somebody is coming out of, our system, they've been maybe incarcerated, or, they're a single mother, they're looking to change their lives, a single father, an individual, a young person who's like, college isn't for me. I don't want the loans. I don't want the
Mhm.
debt. What is it that they can be looking to make after they get into one of these maybe junior tech jobs or intro tech jobs?
Yep. So that's a great question, and I would say I'm going to add a couple more layers to that. Um, Tech is also a hugely expansive field, software engineering. So you could work at a big tech company, your Amazons, your Microsofts. You could work at a nonprofit. You could work at a bank. You could work for the school district, and so
Mm.
your pay is going to like fluctuate depending on like which industry within tech you want to go into. And so I would say for junior into 120, I think the average in our area is somewhere between 110 to 117 in that
Mm.
ballpark, and that's just base salary. That's not including bonuses. So it's definitely it offers a lot of financial stability. But beyond that, people don't talk enough about the benefits that you get, right? You get a flexible work schedule. You can work from home. You get great benefits. Like at my current job right now, they pay for medical and dental and vision. That's a great benefit. I love that.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so it depends, and yeah, so it depends where you want to go within tech. Obviously the big companies pay the most, but if you don't want to work for those big companies, you can still apply your skills somewhere else. You could freelance. So there's flexibility in work settings too.
Well, I gotta ask you too before I let you go. Lots of folks in community have heard about these tech those stressful, or the environment being not really catering to them as a person, as Ada did for you. But tell us a little bit about your experience. Now you've moved from your internship, right? You went through that. Now you've landed a sounds like amazing job.
Love it.
But
Yeah.
but can you explain a little bit about the environment before I let you go?
Yeah, it would be hard to describe in one word because it is really varied. Um, So I would say even at yes, all of those stories that you've heard are true.
Yeah.
There are people who have experienced them. And also, you can still find your people. You can still find places where you can thrive within tech. Like at big companies, for example, we've all heard the horror stories, but there are also great teams within those big companies. They're
Mhm.
huge. And so if you do want to go the big company route, say you don't like your team, you can transfer teams.
Mhm.
Maybe you don't like corporate culture at all. You can join a startup, and that tends to be more relaxed. Yeah, so for me, I joined a startup. I love my team. I love the culture that I'm in. And yeah, tech is stressful, but it's not more stressful than any other job I've had. Sometimes I feel like when people describe it that way, it's like a gatekeeping
Mm.
mechanism to
Mhm.
make it seem worse than what it actually is. Like, yes, tech is stressful. It's not more stressful than any other job I've had.
Whoa, wow. I mean, Mariya Burrows, you've brought a host of information with you today. And lastly, you can look right there in the camera, let folks know how they can get that they need to do to make that first step.
Yes. So the first thing I would recommend is going to Ada Developers Academy, their online website, and they actually have their own free curriculum posted there. And so I would recommend going through that, getting comfortable with those basics, supplementing your learning with YouTube tutorials. Free Code Camp is one of my favorite ones. But really go through that curriculum. And then their next application cycle opens in September. And if this is something that you want to do, I would encourage you to apply. And for anyone interested, find me on LinkedIn. I would love to share more resources with you and help you get set up.
Absolutely. Mariya Burrows, I so appreciate you bringing this information to this platform, Chats with Trae. I told you I wanted to go in depth, and you definitely brought the knowledge and your personal lived experience. So we so appreciate you being a champion and really making this pathway for yourself, but leaving the door open for others. As you said just there, you're willing to help folks. So appreciate that. And, this is just the beginning for us. I've told you there's plenty of different environments where we have to bring your knowledge into it so that people can see themselves in the pathway that may be the best one for them. So thank you again so
Thank you,
much.
Trey. Thank you
Yeah.
for having me.
Absolutely. You guys heard it here from Mariya Burrows, and I'm excited because I think that there's a wide variety of ways that this information can be applied when we're talking about our young people, folks that are trying to figure it out. They graduate high school and they can be looking at these coding classes right now online, as she just described. And I encourage you guys, Mariya right here is finding herself as a part of the solution by being there for others, being willing to kind of help others along the pathway. You guys know, for me, it's always about finding yourself as a part of the solution. And I'm hoping that every guest I can bring on here to this platform, Chats with Trae, is going to be in just that. Thank you guys so much for watching this episode of Chats with Trae. You guys know we are on every Friday at 2 p.m. And I'm looking forward to hosting the next episode. See you then.
Chats with Trae. Chats with Trae. Chats with Trae.